Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. The Bitcoin miners are once again off to the races, really on the back of some unexpected news overnight or an AWS catalyst. We're going to be talking about that in today's presentation, plus recent news from our favorite miners. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below what you think of today's discussion and your top pick in the sector. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, away we go. Monday afternoon, an eventful start to the trading week. We're going to be talking about some recent headlines, really global headlines as it relates to data center capacity and outages, then get into some more miner-specific news and our outlook on the sector. So we ended off last week a little bit of a negative outlook in the sector. Thursday was a big sell-off. It was my largest single loss day in my trading career. Friday was really an extension of that. We did see a little bit of recovery towards the end of trading, but the last 2 days last week, difficult in the sector. That seems to have reversed a little bit over the weekend. Bitcoin showing some strength, was in excess of 111, now retreated to 110 range, and the miners looking very strong to kick off the week.
Yeah, we had that sort of like normal Asia pullback on Sunday. There we've got the price, up to 111,000. I thought we'd stay at least in that range, but it's pulled back to just over 110, 600 at the moment as we do the podcast. But yeah, a bit higher than 104 we saw just literally a few days ago. So there's a lot of optimism for Bitcoin in the social media chat land there. Many people are saying it's still going to reach highs by the end of the year. And we'll just follow this process. I mean, you've got to take these days where it drops, 5 or 6,000. We had a big day, 17,000 not too long ago. And you take those days, you take it on the chin, but it has recovered, reasonably well every time. It's still in that, 110,000 range there, which is really, really positive. The high is 126,000, so not too far away from the all-time high. And we've still got a few more months left of this bull cycle. So we'll be paying close attention to it. As for the miners, they seem to be having a really good day. And again, it's, I get this impression we're seeing a decoupling again now. The Bitcoin price, if you look at the whole period since the halving, it's probably not risen as high as people expected to have risen compared to previous cycles. But the mining stocks do seem to have picked up, especially since around about April this year. And this last month, we're seeing some stellar increases across the board. In fact, an average miner has gone up by at least 4-6% over the last month. And today's just an extension of that. So it's great to see Bit Digital up there, 16% up. CleanSpark having a good day, and we'll come on to CleanSpark in a short while. Mara and Riot, two of the older favourites there, back from 2021, the first two miners list on the Nasdaq. They're up over 11% each there, and Cipher at 10%, but all green, apart from Soluna. And we talk about Soluna probably more than most miners at the moment because they're bringing out an update literally every couple of days, and we'll see an increase of 10 or 12% one day, and then we'll see the reverse that the next day. Today they seem to be playing the opposite of what the rest of the miners are doing, although in early pre-market trading they were $1 higher than they are at the moment. So they're sort of bucking the trend where a lot of the miners are at day highs as we speak. Some of these miners, including Soluna and IREN and Hive, are at sort of like the lows for the day now. They've already sort of like been significantly high and they've pulled back a bit. But I will say from a 5-day and from a month position, Soluna is the best performing mining stock. So today, even though it's down 13%, don't take too much of that into account. I mean, they are driving some really good updates out there. They've got plenty of financing coming their way. They've got lots of hosting contracts that they've signed. They're moving into AI. They've got a pipeline of 2 gigawatts. And they're starting to do more than one project at once, which is something that they haven't done in previous years.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We'll talk about their pipeline a little bit later in the presentation. It's interesting to see that decoupling you talk about. I guess Soluna from the rest of the pack and the Bitcoin miners from Bitcoin. We're in the midst of this secular AI HPC re-rate. We've been talking about that theme on the channel for months and months, and it appears it's now happening in front of our eyes. Now, in addition to the regular optimism we find ourselves in at the start of the week here with the Bitcoin miners, today was interesting for another reason. Overnight, AWS or Amazon Web Services went down. Now, this is one of the hyperscalers we talk about extensively on the channel, one of the potential co-location partners for these Bitcoin miners. And what this really showed is how centralized the data center network is in the United States. Now, we've got some details about the outage itself. Again, you can see headlines really across the world. Most of you were probably impacted in some way. I know my Amazon Alexa wouldn't connect this morning for music. You can see in terms of companies, these are the notable ones: Amazon, AT&T, Canva, McDonald's, Lyft, Fidelity, T-Mobile, Venmo, United Airlines. So really across all sectors here, the bottleneck, you guys, is data center capacity and these hyperscalers. The fact that so much of this information and data center capacity is centralized in the hands of just a few companies. So for the Bitcoin mining stocks, we feel this is a huge bullish catalyst as these companies try and break into that space, bring on new data center capacity, up-to-date data center architecture, and really an attempt to decentralize the hyperscaler grip on this HPC AI compute sector. So with that being said, you mentioned the miners were off to the races here. I think a lot of people are now looking at this sector as a potential way to play the HPC data center boom.
Yeah, and pretty much all the miners now are going to be, looking to validate whether their power can be driven towards HPC. And, we've already seen a number of large contracts signed: Core Scientific, TeraWulf, Cipher have just signed a contract. There are a number of other miners queuing up to sign contracts as well. We've covered a lot on Bitfarms, on Riot. Every miner, we had some pure play miners, the likes of Marathon and CleanSpark, but they both have sort of like basically 180 about turned and starting to look at how they can utilize some of the power they've got. And we'll talk a bit more about CleanSpark in a second. But that decoupling certainly, is far more obvious now because, we've seen the Bitcoin price volatile, and in previous times we'd see the miners follow that suit there. But as you quite rightly say, when you've got that requirement or the gap in power in the US, and who's got the power? Well, the mining companies have got the power. So, having that power available there gives them the opportunity to build out over these next 2 or 3 years data centers that can meet that demand. And there's a massive demand. I think at the moment, Dan Roberts was saying there's 4 to 5 gigawatts of power supporting in America, and it needs to be significantly higher than that. He said in the 30s. Sueni said higher than that in the 40s, and we've even seen estimates that are stretching maybe double that amount. So where's the power at the moment? A lot of the miners have got power and they're looking to utilize that power, maybe move away from Bitcoin mining because it's not been the most profitable business strategy for most of the miners. I think with the exception of maybe IREN, who make a profit, having the most efficient fleet and having some of the cheapest power in the US, many of the other miners, if you take into account the paying for the machines, are having a real difficult time making a real profit.
Yeah, you're quite right about that. Now, if we double click on this outage itself, AWS first reported a problem just after midnight Pacific time, so around 3 a.m. Eastern time. It was in their US East 1 region in Virginia. Now, this is interesting. We've heard a lot of companies really focused in on this northeastern region. We're going to talk about some of those companies in a second, but this is known in the United States and really globally as a critical center for global internet connectivity, a default region for a lot of companies and users online. And it again highlights this challenge we've seen around businesses being so centralized within just a few cloud computing solutions or providers. So with that being said, If we bring up a map of the United States data center coverage, you can see that northeastern region we're talking about, the large red circle there, known or dubbed as the data center capital of the world. Now, interestingly enough, if we bring up the map from Bitfarms here in terms of their data center pipeline, a lot of similarities. You can see some of those big international fiber connections coming into the east coast of the United States, and really that proximity that Ben and team have been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your issue before about the power and also the trying to maintain that level of power constantly, what you got to remember is that the US has got an aging infrastructure for power. And there's been no investment in bringing that up to date like other countries have done in their areas. It's a real challenge in America, and we've heard this from the Bitcoin miners before we even started talking about HPC, in the fact that, having power in one area doesn't necessarily mean you can move that power easily around the country to service other areas. It's a real aging infrastructure. It hasn't been really changed in the last 50 years. And so, when you're having the amount of electricity usage for not just for AI, but for the internet as well in the US, you're going to have problems. These, like you say there, the likes of the power areas that Bitfarms have in Pennsylvania, in Washington, and in Quebec there, especially Pennsylvania, as you've already highlighted, where that's servicing, across the Atlantic to Europe as well. It really means that, there's potential there to use that, that 1 gigawatt of Bitfarms pipeline, of which one of their sites, the Panther Creek site, has been talked about significantly in the past sort of like 6 to 8 months, in terms of, being a site that ticks every box. Its location is surrounded by about 7 or 8 hyperscalers, so it's in the right area. All you've got to do there is really build out the facility, and guess what? They've just managed to raise sufficient funding to do that. So we're going to see that first facility get built at Panther Creek site there. I'm hoping that Ben can give us an update soon with news of potential suitors coming in for that site, because that will help them again deliver what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you look at the Washington slide in their deck, it talks about the proximity to a lot of these other data centers and clusters. Proximity matters a lot in this space, not only for latency, but also proximity to large urban centers as well. So when looking at that US map, you can obviously see exactly what you talked about there. Data center capacity is restricted by region, and the infrastructure itself, whether we're talking about power generation, which is a big bottleneck, or the transfer of that power around the United States, based on a legacy system that has not got a lot of investment. Now, another similarity this reminded me of was the Lake Mariner site with TeraWulf. So we've talked extensively about them. They've got a hyperscaler deal backed by FluidStack Google, so one of AWS's rivals or peers. If you look at the Lake Mariner slide in the most recent deck, again, you can see that proximity, that focus on the northeastern part of the United States, where a large percentage of the population resides.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about Lake Mariner, there's 500 megawatts available already, but there's going to be another potential 250 pending approval. So that'll give them 750 megawatts. They're also looking at, this recent purchase of a second site up there. That's far exceeding the contracts that they have in place there. So they're looking to expand their HPC. They've got about 10 exahash of mining on the go at the moment, which is providing some really good cash flow while they build out these data centers. But everything's turning quite well for TeraWulf themselves. They've just raised the final $3.2 billion, which will give them sufficient funding now to complete all the capital requirements for all the contracts that they have in place now. So they're really sort of like, in terms of funding, really ahead of the game in comparison to peers.
Yeah, it validates the thesis. When we chatted with Patrick Fleury from TeraWulf, he talked about financing risk being one of the final pieces of the pie. Now that that's been removed, it looks like the market is really running full steam on a lot of these names. Now, Core Scientific's another one we've talked about a lot on the channel. They've got their vote with CoreWeave coming up in just a few days' time. An interesting slide from the CoreWeave deck we wanted to bring up. We obviously are very bullish on Core Scientific on the 590 megawatt deal they have with CoreWeave. But if you look at this deck or this slide, you can see it doesn't stop there. 2+ gigawatts of power or gross power potential. And if you look at the map, again, we were led to believe most of their operations were in Texas. You can see that Core Scientific actually has a presence in the Northeast as well, along with a number of other data center sites around the US. So it really got us thinking, if there's such a problem getting power online, building data center capacity, really harnessing these megawatts, again, it's the Bitcoin miners that are in pole position here.
Yeah, and the one thing that's Core Scientific stands out against all its peers is it's actually delivering the contract already. So it's already started to receive revenues from delivering that contract at both the Austin, Texas site and at the Denton, which is their flagship facility, a 400 megawatt site there, 260 megawatts of compute power at that site there, and they're already started to get paid for that. And those payments will start to increase as each additional megawatt gets added to the contract. Remember, a total of 590 megawatts. That's probably as high as all the other miners, in North America contracts if you added them together. And we do have we use our slide to compare that the deal that they have with CoreWeave, which, as you quite rightly say, just over a week's time from today, that vote will be finalised, and it's a simple majority. 50% of the votes that have been put forward will be determine, whether the deal goes ahead or not. And we know there are some sort of larger shareholders out there that are actually saying they're not going to vote this way. So it's going to be an interesting one there. I look at it from a value perspective. I mean, you mentioned that 2 gigawatts of power there. Yes, they've got 1.3 of existing capacity with the incremental additional gigawatt of potential expansion at some of these sites. I know another company that's got 2 gigawatts of power at one of their sites, Sweetwater, IREN. They're valued at $16 billion today, and they're not delivering the level of HPC that Core Scientific are delivering today. So, it's a real challenge. When you look at the valuation of Core Scientific as we speak at the moment, it's just over $5.5 billion. And IREN's at $16.5 billion. So the market's really looking at that deal there. Maybe if this deal doesn't go through with Core, we will see a re-rating of the valuation of Core Scientific, because I can't believe that they're valued, below some of their peer miners like Cipher, Riot, and Mara, when they've got the biggest contract out there. So there is, something to think about. But as I say, a week left. We'll move on to the slide just to show you what that valuation looks like at the moment. Share price, as the podcast started, for over $1 lower than the actual price that CoreWeave valued the company at back on the 7th of July. They valued it at $20.40, and $9 billion at that point in time seemed to be a fair price. I think a lot of shareholders were sort of like reasonably happy. But the deal wasn't about $9 billion. It was about a floating CoreWeave share price. And the CoreWeave share price on that particular day was $165. Well, today it's $130. That's $35 less. And there's only a week left now for this vote to go through. That deal gives an indicative price for Core Scientific, $16.07. So if the deal goes through, it means that shareholders are getting less than what the value of the share price is today. So my understanding from that really is that the market and shareholders are thinking that this deal is not going to go through, and the market's starting to give Core Scientific a higher premium. There seems to be a lot of social media chat saying people aren't happy with the current deal. As I say, before all these other deals were announced, it seemed a fair deal there. But the fact that they didn't have a cap on that price there is potentially going to affect shareholders. Now, the flip side of that is, if CoreWeave, which is going to be one of the hyperscalers in the long run, when they start increasing their expansion plans, not just in the North America, but all over Europe and the rest of the world, which they are starting to do already. I believe they're looking to invest $10 billion in the UK alone. That's what you got to think about. Our CoreWeave, of which you'll be a CoreWeave shareholder post the date, if the deal's approved, are you going to have significant more opportunity to grow your CoreWeave share price than taking the Core Scientific share price at $19 today, or whatever the prices at the date of the deals approved. That's where you've got to sort of like you've got to work around there. I think that shareholders think it's not enough at the moment. I'm probably inclined to agree with them. It doesn't look like Corp are going to come back to the table, but that'll be down to them. If they don't come back and offer more money and the shareholders vote against it, then we go back to the status quo where we know Core Scientific will start receiving 850 million a year for delivering the contract. And bear in mind, they've still got 1.3 gigawatts of power to deliver to potentially other customers who come in for HPC compute operations. And we know what the prices are that have been paid out. That could, in the long term, be a much more opportunistic value for Core Scientific shareholders.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's really the $1 million question right now. What are these pipelines worth? What are the various different stages of power and power access worth? To me, it feels like Core Scientific, to use an analogy, it's like if you're at the pool trying to hold a ball underwater. And it eventually makes surface and pops right through. And I feel like that could be happening with the Core Scientific share price, as you say, people starting to, I guess, front run the vote. Now, I just mentioned the question, what is this stuff worth? You mentioned Riot, Cipher, even Marathon. These are some major players. They've got dozens of sites, gigawatts of power. And you can see even during today's trading with companies like Mara, like Bit Digital, they've got that big exposure to Wi-Fi. Some of the players that we haven't necessarily seen moving with HPC AI news are really starting to take some strides today. One specifically, CleanSpark, they've actually doubled down on the HPC AI shift as well, now hiring some top talent in the AI data center world.
Yes, they are. And they've just hired industry veteran Jeffrey Thomas as the Senior Vice President of AI data centers. And that's not unusual for companies to do this. We've seen a number of other companies do exactly the same. Now, we can talk about CleanSpark. I mean, they have got 33, is it 32 or 33 sites, and a total of about just slightly more than 1 gigawatt of power at the moment. So they're going to have an evaluation of all those sites, go back to first principles, and determine which of the sites are viable to deliver a HPC strategy. Now, we remember when they were buying sites to deliver Bitcoin mining, they were looking at smaller sites in more rural areas. And so, offering jobs and bringing in, lots more to the communities out there, getting the communities to want the Bitcoin mining to be, close to their locations and not just enforcing it on the local people. Now they've got to see if some of those small sites are viable for delivering, HPC. Now, they could, I suppose, as a strategy, they could sort of like try to do what IREN are doing in Prince George and sort of like maybe run their own HPC, or what Hive are doing in Canada. Change their facilities into sort of like tier 3 facilities where you're not going to have, maybe 50 megawatts. You might have a 12 megawatt facility, far more manageable with some of the size of their sites. But they do have a few sort of like larger sites, but they don't have anything significant sites. If you look at what Core Scientific, they've got quite a few sites in the 100, 150, 200 megawatt range. And same with like Bitdeer, same with Cipher. They've all got these really big sites. And we're hearing again from a number of senior people that the market's looking to find companies that can deliver up to like 500 megawatts. They're not looking for really small sites. So this is the challenge that CleanSpark have. And the other thing is, what they could do is they could go out there and find these 500 megawatt sites. But the chances of finding them now are probably going to be quite challenging, because every bit of power out there available must be being sought by some of the hyperscalers. The miners have got a significant amount of power, or able to tap into power. They've got connections with the power companies. But if you try and go out there and find out, sites now that just automatically can be, turned into HPC data centers, that they'd be like gold mines, and they'd be very hard to find, from my opinion, if they haven't already been found. These companies have been looking for years, and it's only now that they realize, hey, guess who's got the power? The mining companies. Right, we need to sort of like make, contracts with the mining companies. That's what we're seeing happening at the moment. So, but CleanSpark had to make that move, I think. I think the Bitcoin mining industry is going to be a challenge the next halving. they've got to 50 exahash very well. One of the top operators in the business there, but it's just the profitability of that business when you're having to buy machines is not fantastic, not as good as people thought it would be. We haven't seen the Bitcoin price rally as much as what people expected post the halving. Margins are so challenging. I mean, at the moment, really, we'll find out from the next earnings. It might only be IREN that have literally, again, the only miner to really make full profits when you take into account all costs and not just selective costs. That's where you see who can deliver and who can't deliver. So it's going to be a challenge, but great to see them turn around on this one. And it gives the stock prices has actually performed really well in the last sort of month or so since they started talking about this. Since the last CEO left the company, and a lot of the staff have been promoted. So hopefully they can turn this around. But the share price is certainly getting back to where it was sort of in April last year, and I think a lot of shareholders will be quite happy with that.
Yeah, and Matt Schultz has hinted at expanding into a new state as well. Now, interestingly enough, you talk about the size versus proximity debate. A lot of the big co-location sites we talk about with Riot, with IREN, with Cipher, again, located maybe not as close to urban centers. We did highlight the Atlanta, Georgia sites with CleanSpark, and interesting to see in that same discussion or paragraph, as you quoted, Anthony, Scott Garrison, Chief Development Officer and Executive Vice President, goes on to say, we recently contracted for additional power and real estate in College Park to deliver high-value compute to the greater Atlanta metro area. We are evaluating gigacampus opportunities across the portfolio and pipeline and are well positioned to satisfy significant off-taker demand. So again, referring to those Atlanta sites that we talked about a few months back on the channel, seem to be some opportunities there. Again, maybe not the scale we see with some of the other Bitcoin miners, but the proximity to that urban center. So with that being said, the real question here, what is this stuff worth? It appears the market seems to be answering more than it's worth now. And that's why we're seeing money, institutions, interest really flow into the Bitcoin mining space. And that's exactly why, in our opinion, we're seeing this decoupling between Bitcoin movement, and the price of these Bitcoin mining stocks. So again, another catalyst, this one somewhat unexpected. Amazon Web Service goes down, and it really highlights some of the pain points in the US data center network.
Yeah, and I think the stock prices of some of these companies that are showing they want to put their power towards HPC and AI services, they've really started to see their companies, market capitalization go, significantly higher. We've already mentioned IREN there, over 16.5 billion. That was over 18 billion not too long ago. The share price has pulled back a little bit to $61, but that's a share price you could have bought for just over $5 back in April this year, literally 6 months ago. Riot's having a good run. Cipher is now the third largest of these companies. We say Bitcoin mining companies, but they're not really Bitcoin mining companies anymore now. I don't know what we're going to call them. Data center companies. Their valuation 8.2. Mara's still holding 8 billion. So Mara and Riot are at their valuation now that we saw at the highest in 2021 when we had the bull cycle there. So they've reached the same level now there. CleanSpark, again, $22.11. It's been as high as 23.61 in the last 52 weeks, so not far away from its 52-week high. Core Scientific at 5.8 million with that sizable contract. That's the real head scratcher for me. Wulf over 5.5 billion. Hut over 5 billion, Bitdeer over 5 billion. We're seeing, all of these companies now significantly more valuable than they were sort of 6 or 7 months ago. And, even the likes of Bitfarms, very close to 3 billion as well there. All these companies we've mentioned all have one thing in common. They're all looking to use a lot of their power towards HPC. Can they do it? We've seen 4 or 5 of them already land contracts. The rest of them, I'm sure, will follow, because that gap in power requirements is just getting bigger and bigger every time we get another update, Bryce.
Just incredible where we find ourselves right now, the opportunity in front of us. And when you start to think about potential catalysts, you mentioned Bitcoin price. We've got that one. We've got co-location deals. We've got the fact that every deal one of these companies get seem to lift the entire sector. Q3 earnings coming up. So I know Riot is scheduled to come out on the 30th. We'll start to get some more detail. A lot of these companies have paused their monthly production reports. So earnings is a great time for new investors to learn about the story. We've got power scarcity. You've got FOMO in the sector. And then finally, the amount of influencers I've seen now jumping on some of these names, the Cipher, the IREN, the Bitfarms, just incredible to see the momentum in the sector. So you and I put this list together 2 years back, Anthony. It seems like it was a good basket of stocks to follow. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments section below. Where does this end? What's next for the miners? And are we ready for that next level of liftoff or takeoff here? Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.